The stars above Earth glowed dimly as the alien fleet hovered just beyond the planet's atmosphere, their massive ships like shadows waiting to strike. Zeroth, the commanding officer of the invasion, stood in the heart of his flagship's command center, watching the Earth below with disdain. The planet, rich in resources, had long been a target of his empire, but it was not the resources that intrigued him now. It was the stories, the myths, the legends of the human race that had caught his attention. For centuries, his people had conquered countless worlds, easily subjugating those they deemed weaker. But when they arrived on Earth, they were greeted with a series of strange stories. Stories about humans fighting back against impossible odds, about warriors rising from the ashes of defeat to win battles that should have been lost. Zeroth scoffed at them. How could a species so young, so technologically inferior, stand a chance against a mighty alien empire like his? He had dismissed these tales as mere folklore, the fantasies of a primitive people trying to make sense of their survival. "Tell me, Zeroth," came the voice of one of his senior officers, a towering figure named Zalara. "Do you truly believe these human stories? They speak of legends, heroes who never give up, who stand against overwhelming power. It is laughable." Zeroth sneered, tapping his fingers against the console in front of him. "Legends, Zalara. Myths to make them feel better about their inevitable defeat. Do you really think a species that still struggles to control its own planet could challenge us?" Zalara's expression darkened. "I have heard the humans speak of their heroes, their champions. Perhaps there is something to these tales. What if the stories are more than mere fables? Perhaps we should look into it." "Look into it?" Zeroth's laughter filled the command room. "You are wasting your time. These legends are just that. Legends. The humans are weak, and their so-called heroes are nothing more than pawns in a game they can't understand." Despite Zeroth's confident dismissal, a small seed of doubt began to grow in his mind. What if there was some truth to these stories? What if there was something more to the humans than he had realized? He decided, just to prove a point, to capture one of their war heroes and force him to tell them the truth. He wanted to hear the story straight from their mouth, to see if there was any real substance behind the myth of human bravery. With a command, the ship's crew launched a mission to capture one of Earth's most famous resistance leaders, Captain Daniel Daniels, a man who had led countless successful strikes against alien forces. Zeroth watched from his command center as Daniels was taken from his hiding place in the wilderness and brought aboard the flagship. The human's eyes were defiant, and he showed no fear as he stood before the alien officers. "Bring him to me," Zeroth ordered. Moments later, Captain Daniels stood in the center of the command room, his arms bound but his posture proud. He stared at the alien officers, his eyes unwavering, despite the overwhelming odds stacked against him. The alien guards, towering and armored, flanked him, but Daniels gave no sign of fear. Zeroth couldn't help but feel a strange unease. The humans were supposed to be weak, terrified creatures. Yet here was a man who didn't seem to acknowledge the gravity of his situation. "Tell me, human," Zeroth said, his voice laced with mockery. "Do you believe in these legends that your kind clings to? The stories of warriors rising up, defeating impossible enemies, defying fate itself. You call yourselves heroes, yet you are nothing more than insects, swarming in the face of our power. How does it feel to live in the shadow of the truth?" Daniel stood tall, his voice steady as he spoke. "I've heard your kind laugh at our stories. I've seen your forces crush everything in your path, but we're still here. You think we're weak, that our victories are mere accidents. But I'm here to tell you that every one of those stories, every single one of those so-called myths, is true." Zeroth leaned forward, a cruel smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You expect me to believe that? That your kind, with all your flaws, could truly stand against the might of my empire? I've seen your cities fall, your armies crumble. Tell me, human, what makes you so sure?" Daniel's eyes didn't waver. "Because we never give up. Because we believe in each other, and we believe in the fight. The stories you mock are the ones that have kept us alive, kept us pushing forward when every other option seemed impossible. You see us as weak, but you fail to understand that our greatest strength is in our resolve. You don't defeat us by crushing our bodies. You defeat us by destroying our spirit. But you haven't done that yet. Sarath's amusement faded as he watched the human. There was something in his eyes, a determination, a fire, that Karath had not seen in any other species. It was clear that Daniels was not afraid to die. But what did it mean for a species to fight like this, to put their lives on the line without fear of defeat? This was something Sarath didn't fully understand. So, you believe your stories will save you? Sarath asked, still unsure. I don't need stories to save me, Daniels replied. But our history, our heroes, are what have made us who we are. The heroes you mock are the ones who led us through wars, through hunger, through fear. They've given us the strength to keep fighting, no matter what. And when we fight, we don't just fight for ourselves. We fight for the future of everyone we love. Sarath stared at him, his mind racing. He had expected a human to cower, to beg for mercy. But here was a soldier who seemed to draw strength from the very thing Sarath had dismissed, the idea that the humans believed in something greater than themselves. A myth, a story, a legend. For a moment, Sarath was silent, caught off guard by the power behind Daniels's words. There was something unsettling in the air. His officers exchanged confused glances, unsure of what to make of the humans' defiance. The alien empire had never encountered a species quite like this before. We'll see if your spirit is enough to save you, Sarath said, finally breaking the silence. But don't think for a moment that your legends will protect you from the might of my empire. Daniels gave a faint smile. You'll see soon enough. The legends are real. And soon, you'll understand why the human race isn't going down without a fight. As Daniels was led away, Sarath couldn't shake the feeling that he had underestimated this human. The myths had taken on a new meaning. Perhaps, just perhaps, the human legends were not as ridiculous as he had thought. And so, the story of humanity's fight for survival had only just begun. The alien ships hovered above Earth, their massive forms casting dark shadows over the cities below. Sarath, a high-ranking commander in the alien empire, watched the planet through the glowing blue windows of his command ship. His race had traveled across galaxies, conquering countless worlds. Nothing had ever stood in their way. But this time, things were different. They had landed on Earth, a primitive, unimportant planet, or so they thought. The humans had fought back, resisting in ways that were unexpected. Sarath and his forces had never anticipated such determination from a species they deemed weak and inferior. They laughed at the stories and myths of human warriors, thinking them mere exaggerations. But after weeks of fighting, the resistance had proven relentless. The aliens had to pause and question everything they thought they knew about humans. Sarath summoned his top officers to a meeting, an important one. He was not a fool. He could see the resistance was far more organized than expected. He could see the humans were learning fast, adapting to alien technology, and striking with tactics that caught his forces off guard. His troops had never been so challenged, and the aliens were starting to lose ground. The myths of human resilience had started to shift from joke to reality. Sarath wanted answers. Gather around, he commanded, his voice sharp and cold. It's time to investigate these so-called human legends. They may hold the key to understanding why they fight the way they do. The officers exchanged glances, some of them skeptical, others intrigued. Sarath was known for his decisiveness, but this time, his curiosity about the humans' strange persistence had grown into something else. It wasn't just their resistance that troubled him. It was the way their stories seemed to fuel their warriors. Myths of heroes, of individuals standing against insurmountable odds, of soldiers who would sacrifice everything to protect their kind. The humans spoke of their history in a way that made it seem like they were invincible, though Xarath knew they were anything but. His officers, confident in their superiority, chuckled at the notion. Are we really expected to believe that these primitive creatures possess the strength to challenge us? One officer sneered. Xarath remained silent for a moment before turning to face the officer. His gaze was icy, cold enough to freeze the air. We have underestimated them, Xarath replied. And I have had enough of it. We will see if these legends are true or just stories made up to make their warriors feel brave. Bring me one of their leaders, a hero. I want to hear their tale from the source. As soon as the command was given, one of the officers left the room. Xarath turned back to the view screen, watching Earth as if searching for an answer. What was it that made humans so unpredictable? Why were they not surrendering? The aliens had crushed countless civilizations, but humans, they were different. Meanwhile, on the surface, Earth's resistance was preparing for the next wave. Captain Daniels, a battle-hardened leader who had survived many encounters with the alien invaders, was briefing his team in a darkened underground command center. They had lost ground recently, but Daniels knew that their will was stronger than any weapon the aliens possessed. They had fought too hard to give up now. The aliens had underestimated humanity's resilience, and Daniels had no intention of letting them forget that. The doors to the command room opened, and in walked a group of alien soldiers, towering and armored. They held Daniels at gunpoint, but he didn't flinch. He had faced worse. The leader of the group, an imposing figure with cold, unfeeling eyes, stepped forward. "You are Captain Daniels?" the alien commander asked, his voice deep and harsh. "That's right," Daniels replied, his voice steady. "And you are?" "I am Xarath, commander of the invasion force," Xarath said, his voice carrying an air of superiority. "I have come to hear your legends firsthand. You humans love to tell tales of heroes. Let us see if they are worth anything." Daniels couldn't help but smile, despite the situation. He'd heard of Xarath before. The alien commander was infamous for his arrogance, for thinking that humans were nothing more than insects to be crushed. He had never bothered to consider that they might have something worth fighting for. "You want to hear my story," Daniels said, standing tall despite the aliens' weapons aimed at him. "All right, but you might regret it." Xarath gave a slight wave, signaling his soldiers to lower their weapons. He motioned for Daniels to speak. "As you wish," Daniels said, crossing his arms. "But I warn you, it's not a fairy tale. It's real. And it's going to be a lot harder to dismiss once you hear it." With a single nod from Xarath, Daniels began. "It all started years ago, when we didn't know you were coming. The first signs of your invasion were small, just rumors, whispers, but we didn't take them seriously at first. Humans had always been fighters, but we didn't think we could face an empire like yours. You were too powerful, too advanced. But then we realized we had no choice. Our cities were burning, our families were dying, and that's when we rose." Xarath listened intently, his posture rigid, his eyes narrowing. "And what happened next?" Daniels paused, his mind flashing back to the early days of the invasion. "At first, we were scattered, different groups fighting for survival. But then, we came together. We realized that if we didn't unite, we'd fall. So we fought back, hard. You didn't expect that. You didn't expect us to learn your technology, to adapt and fight back with our own weapons. You didn't expect that we'd find the cracks in your empire." The alien officers looked at each other, their skepticism starting to fade. The legend of the human fight for survival was beginning to feel real. "I don't know about your legends," Daniels continued, "but I can tell you this. Humans will never give up. We will fight. We will sacrifice. We will endure, and we will keep coming. No matter how many of us fall, we'll keep standing." Xarath's eyes softened slightly, his expression still unreadable. For the first time, doubt flickered in his mind. He had been certain that humanity would crumble under the weight of his invasion. But now, faced with this defiant human warrior, He was not so sure. "You think your species will survive?" Karoth asked, his voice low, almost contemplative. "You think you can defeat us?" "I don't think we will survive," Daniel said. "I know we will." For a moment, there was silence. The alien officers, still unsure what to make of this human who stood before them, exchanged glances. Zeroth, however, remained focused on Daniels. The alien commander was no longer laughing. The myths of human warriors had slowly begun to take on new meaning. The more Daniel spoke, the more the alien leader realized that humanity's strength was not just in their weapons or their tactics. It was in something deeper, something that had driven them to fight for their very survival, something the aliens had never encountered before. "Tell me more," Exaroth said, his voice quieter now, almost respectful. Daniels looked at him and smiled grimly. "You want to hear about the hero's journey, the real one? Fine. Let me tell you about the first battle we won against you, when the odds were against us, and we still found a way." And so the story began, unfolding in ways that would challenge everything Exaroth and his empire had ever believed. Captain Daniels took a deep breath, his mind drifting back to the first major battle against the alien invaders. He had to start from the beginning, explaining the impossible odds, the human resolve, and the desperate measure that saved them. Zeroth's eyes remained fixed on him, his expression unreadable, as he silently demanded to know more. "The first battle we fought against you," Daniels began, "we didn't stand a chance. We knew that. You had technology that made ours look like child's toys. Your ships, your weapons, your forces, they were all far superior to anything we had. We were just ordinary people, farmers, engineers, doctors, soldiers. No one had prepared us for an invasion on this scale. But when you arrived, we didn't just surrender." Zeroth's face twisted into a subtle sneer. "How foolish," he muttered, shaking his head. "You should have. You were nothing more than prey." Daniels locked eyes with him, unwavering. "That's where you're wrong, Exaroth. We are not prey. We might not have had your advanced technology, but we had something you didn't: our will to survive, our unity, and our determination. When Earth was attacked, the world didn't fall apart. We fought. We fought like we had nothing to lose." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "It all started when we discovered your fleet descending over the Atlantic. At first, we thought it was just a military drill, some kind of prank, maybe even some new technology we didn't understand. But then the first blast hit, and we knew it was real. Cities were vaporized in seconds. The devastation was immediate. We tried to fight back with our own planes and missiles, but it was laughable. Your ships were too powerful. We had no idea how to stop you." Daniels paused, the memories haunting him. It was still hard to believe how close humanity had come to extinction in those first hours. Our governments, our leaders, made contact with the aliens, offering peace. We had nothing to offer, nothing to trade. But we tried. We thought maybe if we gave up our cities, surrendered our resources, we could buy some time, maybe survive. Zeroth's lip curled in amusement. "You begged for mercy." "We didn't beg," Daniels countered, his voice rising slightly, filled with an undeniable pride. "We tried to understand you, to offer peace, but you weren't interested. You attacked without hesitation, and that's when we realized that the only way we'd survive was by fighting back. We didn't have a choice." The alien officer's face hardened. "And what happened then? You couldn't defeat us." "No," Daniels agreed. "Not at first. But we found a way to fight. A way you never expected. It wasn't with weapons, Zeroth. It was with tactics, something you didn't think we were capable of. We weren't a unified army at first. We were scattered, isolated groups of survivors. But that changed." Daniel's eyes seemed to look past Exaroth, as if recalling the moment he had known they were no longer just defending. They were becoming a real force. "In the early days of your invasion, we saw that the alien ships were vulnerable. There were small gaps in your defenses, places where your technology was weak. You assumed we were too primitive to notice, but we studied, adapted, and began hitting those weak spots. We found out how to bring down a ship. It took time, and it took losses, but we learned. Zeroth raised an eyebrow. You think this is what made you special? You learned how to fight back. Daniels ignored the mocking tone. It wasn't just learning to fight back, Zeroth. It was realizing that we could win. We didn't have your strength or your technology, but we had something better. Our brains, our resourcefulness, and our belief in something greater than ourselves. Zeroth was silent for a moment, his expression unreadable. Daniels could see that the alien was struggling to make sense of his words. It was clear now. He had underestimated humanity, thought them incapable of standing up against an empire like his. Daniels continued, his voice steady. One night, a small group of us managed to destroy one of your ships. It wasn't a major ship, a transport vessel, nothing like the warships you had. But it was a start. We were able to capture some of your technology, reverse engineer it, and use it against you. And that, Zeroth, was when you started losing. Zeroth clenched his fists, his eyes narrowing. The thought that humans, the very beings he had considered inferior, had turned their own technology against him was both baffling and unsettling. He had expected to hear a tale of improbable luck or desperation. But this was something else. Daniels could see the shift in Zeroth's demeanor. He wasn't laughing anymore. The skepticism in his eyes had been replaced by something else. Doubt. You truly think this small victory was enough to stop us? Daniels didn't flinch. No, but it was the beginning. The beginning of a real war. You had all the power, Zeroth, but we had something you never counted on. The power of a species that will never stop fighting for its survival. A species that knows how to rally together, to learn, to grow stronger with every defeat. You underestimated us because you didn't understand who we were, and that was your mistake. Zeroth stared at him, his mind working. He had expected to hear an exaggerated story, a tale of desperation. But this was not what he had imagined. He had heard of human perseverance before, but hearing it from the mouth of one of their warriors, standing before him, defiant and proud, was something different. Tell me more, Zeroth said, his voice betraying a rare hint of curiosity. What did you do next? Daniel smiled slightly, almost grimly. We kept fighting, of course. And then we started winning. The alien commander took a step back, his hands folding behind him as he processed the words. What Daniels was saying wasn't just a story. It wasn't just human pride or hope. There was truth in it. Humanity, in its desperation, had not only survived, they had adapted and fought back. Now, they were in a war of attrition, one where every victory, no matter how small, meant more than just survival. It meant humanity's spirit was alive and stronger than ever. Daniels could feel the tension in the room. He knew Zeroth wasn't ready to admit it yet, but the commander had begun to understand. Humans were not as easy to conquer as he had once thought. The battle was far from over, but the tide had shifted. The alien commander had finally realized something important. This was no longer a fight of technology versus the weak. It was a fight of willpower, determination, and the unyielding resolve of humanity to defend their home. You'll find out soon enough, Daniels added. We're not just a threat to your empire. We are your reckoning. Zeroth's eyes narrowed once more. We shall see, human. We shall see. But inside, a seed of doubt had already been planted. The war hero's tale had made an impact. The stories, the legends, the victories that seemed impossible to the alien forces, suddenly, they didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. The alien command room was eerily silent after Captain Daniels finished speaking. Zeroth, still standing with his back straight and arms folded, stared down at the human warrior with an intensity that made the air thick. The commander's expression was unreadable, his sharp eyes calculating as if trying to piece together the implications of what Daniels had just revealed. The others in the room, who had previously mocked the humans, so-called legends, were now uneasy. They were starting to understand that this wasn't just another skirmish. It was the beginning of something bigger, something that could turn the tide against them. Daniels felt the weight of Saruth's gaze but stood firm. He wasn't afraid of this alien commander. He had fought too many battles, faced too many odds, to back down now. This was just another fight, another challenge that needed to be overcome. He knew that Saruth and his forces had underestimated them, and now it was time to make them realize their mistake. Saruth's cold voice broke the silence. You speak of victories, of survival, but what of the end game, human? What will your resistance do when we bring our full force to bear? When we come at you with everything we have? Daniels didn't flinch. He had heard that same line before, from other invaders, other tyrants who thought they could crush humanity underfoot. But they always underestimated something, the heart of the human spirit. We will do what we've always done, Daniels replied evenly. We'll fight, we'll adapt, and we'll win. Saruth's eyes narrowed. You speak of victory, but you know the truth. You cannot win against us. Even your best warriors can only delay the inevitable. You cannot stop us. For a moment, Daniels said nothing. His mind raced back to all the faces he had seen, his fellow soldiers, the civilians he fought to protect, the families who had lost everything. He knew Saruth was right in some ways. They couldn't win by brute force alone, but they could win with something the aliens didn't understand. A drive, a unity, an unbreakable will. You think you're invincible, Daniel said, his voice steady, even though inside he felt the pressure of every word he spoke. But your empire is just as fragile as any other. You've conquered worlds, yes, but you've never encountered a species like us. Humans fight not just for survival, but for something greater, for our families, for our homes, for the future. Saruth took a step closer, his eyes scanning Daniels with a cold, calculating stare. You may have heart, human, but in the end, it will not be enough. What you fail to understand is that your time is running out. Our forces are already preparing for the final assault. We will crush your cities, and you will fall. The mention of a final assault hung in the air, a chilling reminder that their time was growing short. But instead of fear, something sparked in Daniels. The words of the alien commander were meant to intimidate, to break the spirit of the humans. But Daniels had seen that fear before. He had seen the way the human resistance had rallied in the face of impossible odds, how they turned despair into action, how they fought with everything they had. We may be running out of time, Daniel said, meeting Saruth's gaze, but don't think we don't have a plan. Don't think we haven't prepared for this moment. You may have advanced technology, but we have something more powerful. We have our minds, our creativity, our unity. We'll use every resource we have to turn the tide. And we won't stop. Ever. Saruth's expression faltered for the briefest of moments, though it was quickly replaced by a hard mask of defiance. The alien commander was used to seeing the fear in his enemies' eyes, used to seeing them crumble under pressure. But here, standing before him, was a human who was not intimidated. It wasn't just the warrior's bravery that unnerved him. It was the truth in his words. You still think you can defeat us? Saruth said, his voice low but tinged with frustration. Tell me, human, what makes you so sure? Daniels thought back to the moments that defined his fight, to the countless times he had seen his comrades defy the odds, to the humans who had laid down their lives for something bigger than themselves. Because we know what you don't, he said, his voice firm and unyielding. We know that no matter how many times we fall, we rise. We rise because we believe in something worth fighting for, and no empire, no matter how powerful, can take that from us. Saruth paused, his expression unreadable. For a brief second, the room was filled with tension, the weight of the words hanging between them. The alien commander had heard countless tales of human resilience, but hearing it from someone who had lived it, who had experienced it firsthand, was different. It forced him to confront a reality he had refused to consider. Humans were not the easy prey he had once believed them to be. They were a force to be reckoned with. "You talk of rising," Zaroth said, his voice cutting through the silence. "But we will break you. Your resistance will fall, and your cities will burn. It is inevitable." Daniel smiled, though the smile was grim. "Maybe, but we'll never stop fighting, Zaroth. And one thing you'll learn about humans is that we don't need to be the strongest to win. We don't need the biggest armies or the most powerful weapons. All we need is the will to stand up, to keep going no matter how hard it gets." The alien commander studied him for a long moment, his thoughts clearly racing. He had expected defiance, but he had not expected this level of certainty. Daniels was no ordinary soldier. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for the very essence of humanity. And that made him far more dangerous than any weapon Zaroth's empire could muster. "You speak of defiance," Zaroth said quietly, his voice almost tinged with respect. "But in the end, it will mean nothing. We will wipe you out, and your spirit will crumble before us." Daniels, however, was not intimidated. "You can destroy our cities, Zaroth. You can destroy our weapons, our technology, and our armies. But you can never destroy what makes us human. And that's something you'll never be able to conquer." For a moment, there was silence in the room as Zaroth considered the human before him. The alien commander, who had once viewed humanity as weak and fragile, was now starting to realize that there was far more to these humans than he had ever anticipated. The resilience they exhibited, the strength they drew from their unity and belief, was something he had never seen in the countless worlds his empire had conquered. "Perhaps," Zaroth murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, "perhaps there is something more to you humans than I thought." But he quickly regained his composure, the hardness in his eyes returning. "No matter. It will not change the outcome. Your end is coming." Daniels nodded. "Maybe. But even if we fall, we'll do so fighting. And that's a victory you'll never take away from us." Zaroth's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer before he turned away, signaling for his officers to follow. The doors to the command room slid open, and the alien forces left, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Daniels stood alone, his mind racing. He knew the battle was far from over. Zaroth had yet to see the full extent of humanity's resolve, and Daniels was determined to make sure the alien commander never underestimated them again. As he turned back to the war maps and the strategy sessions waiting for him, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The final assault was coming, but so was humanity's reckoning. They had survived the impossible before, and they would do it again. They would rise, no matter how many times they were knocked down, because that was what humans did. They fought, and they never gave up. The tension was palpable in the room as Captain Daniels stared at the flickering holographic map before him. The war was at a critical point. Everything they had fought for, everything they had sacrificed, had led to this moment. The final assault was fast approaching, and Zaroth's forces were preparing to strike a devastating blow that could potentially wipe out the last remaining resistance. Yet Daniels wasn't shaken. He knew that humanity had one last card to play, and this time, they would not be caught off guard. He glanced around the room at the other members of the resistance, his fellow commanders, the soldiers, and the engineers who had been working tirelessly to develop countermeasures to the alien fleet. Everyone was weary, but there was a fire in their eyes, the kind of fire that only came from knowing that their very survival depended on their next actions. "We don't have much time," Daniel said, his voice steady as he addressed the room. "Zaroth and his forces are preparing for the final assault. If we don't act quickly, we won't have a chance." Lieutenant Maya, a seasoned veteran who had fought alongside Daniels since the early days of the invasion, spoke up. "We've got a plan, Captain, but we need to move fast. The last thing we want is to give Saroth any more time to prepare. Daniels nodded. They had prepared for this moment for weeks. They had been working on a way to not only defend themselves, but to strike back at the heart of the alien empire. It was a risky plan, but it was the best chance they had. The humans had discovered a weak point in the alien fleet's defensive grid, a gap that, if exploited, could cripple their operations. But getting close enough to deliver the final blow would be nearly impossible. Saroth's forces were vast, and their advanced technology made them a formidable opponent. "We can't afford to fail," Daniel said, his voice low but full of conviction. "If we don't make this strike, humanity's future is in doubt." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He saw the determination in the eyes of his comrades. They had come this far together, and they were ready for whatever came next. There would be no retreat. There would be no surrender. This was their last stand. "We've gathered everything we need," Maya said, her fingers flying across the holographic control panel as she began bringing up schematics of the alien fleet. "The vulnerability is there, but we'll have to get inside their fleet, right into the heart of their defenses. And that's going to be the hardest part." "Tell me what we're up against," Daniel said, leaning in to examine the map. Maya pointed to a large cluster of alien warships at the center of the fleet. "That's the flagship, the core of their operations. It's heavily protected, surrounded by smaller ships and defense platforms. But here, right here," she said, tapping a small, unassuming space in the middle of the formation, "is where we have our chance. This is the gap in their defenses. The ships surrounding this area are either on patrol or too far away to react in time." Daniel studied the map carefully. It was a narrow opening, but it was there, a sliver of hope in the heart of the alien formation. The key would be getting through the defenses unnoticed and delivering a strike that could destabilize their entire fleet. The risk was enormous. The enemy ships would quickly converge on them once they detected their presence. They would have one chance, one shot to make it count. "We'll need everything we've got," Daniel said, his mind already racing with tactics. "Every fighter, every ship, every soldier. We need to move fast and hit them hard. Once we're in position, we won't have time to second-guess ourselves." The room was silent for a moment, each person weighing the gravity of the situation. Then Major Carter, a former fighter pilot turned strategist, spoke up. "We've got one shot at this, and it's going to take everything we've got. But if we can hit that gap, if we can make it inside their perimeter, we can strike directly at their command center. If we take that down, their entire fleet could fall apart." "That's the key," Daniel said, turning to the rest of the room. "We target their command center, their flagship. Take that down, and the rest of their forces will crumble. They'll lose coordination. Without their central command, the rest of their fleet will be left vulnerable." Major Carter nodded. "I'll need every pilot ready for the attack. We'll fly in under the radar, make our approach from the far side of their formation. It's the only way we'll get close enough to strike." Captain Daniels looked around at his team, his heart heavy with the weight of the plan. There was no guarantee that they would make it out of this alive. In fact, the odds were stacked against them, but there was no other option. They couldn't let Saroth and his forces win. Not now. Not after everything they had fought for. He turned back to the map and pointed at a series of smaller ships scattered around the perimeter of the alien fleet. "We'll need a distraction. Those ships are going to be our problem. Once we make our move, they'll detect us. We need to keep their attention away from the main assault." Lieutenant Maya spoke again, her voice calm but filled with determination. "I've got a few ideas. If we can get close enough to their smaller ships, we can use some of our experimental tech to create interference. We won't be able to disable them completely, but we can disrupt their communications, slow them down long enough for the main strike force to get through." Daniels nodded approvingly. "Good. Make it happen. The rest of you, get your teams ready. This is it. We don't have time to waste." As the room began to buzz with activity, Daniels found a moment to step back and collect his thoughts. His mind kept drifting to the human cost of this war, to the countless lives lost in the defense of Earth, to the families who would never see their loved ones again. The weight of it all pressed down on him, but he knew that he couldn't let it stop him. There was no turning back now. The fate of humanity rested on the next few hours, and they had to make every second count. He took a deep breath, his jaw tightening. For Earth, for humanity, he muttered to himself. As the final preparations began, Daniels looked up one last time at the team around him. These were the people who had fought beside him through thick and thin. These were the warriors who had defied the odds time and time again. Together, they had made it this far, and together, they would go one last time into the heart of the alien empire. It was a do-or-die mission, but Daniels had no doubt. If anyone could do it, it was humanity. And if they succeeded, they wouldn't just stop the alien forces. They would show Xerath and every other empire in the galaxy that humans were not to be underestimated. That no matter how strong, how invincible, an empire thought they couldn't crush the human spirit. "We go in, we hit hard, and we get out," Daniels said one last time, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 battles. The countdown had begun. The moments leading up to the final assault were tense, the weight of the mission pressing down on everyone involved. Captain Daniels stood at the front of the command center, watching as his team prepared for the most dangerous strike they had ever attempted. The alien fleet was closing in, their massive warships positioned like a wall of destruction in the sky. The gap in their defenses, the one chance humanity had, was now their only hope. Daniels knew that once they engaged, there would be no turning back. 5 minutes, Maya said from the control panel, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. "Everyone's in position, Captain. The ships are ready to go." Daniels nodded, his mind racing through the plan one last time. The fighters, led by Major Carter, would take off first, flying under the radar to avoid detection. They would create a diversion, drawing the attention of the alien ships, while Daniels and a small strike team would make their way directly into the heart of the alien fleet. Their mission was clear: get to the flagship, destroy it, and cripple the alien command center. He turned to face the team. The pilots, soldiers, and engineers who had fought alongside him for so long. Each one was filled with a mix of determination and uncertainty. The stakes had never been higher, and the odds had never been more stacked against them. But Daniels saw something in their eyes that gave him confidence. They were ready. "We've trained for this," Daniels said, his voice steady, but filled with the raw emotion of the moment. "No matter what happens, we fight like we've always fought. For Earth, for our families, for everything we believe in. We'll take the fight to them, and we'll win." There was a moment of silence as the words hung in the air. Then a unified cheer broke out. It wasn't just a cheer, it was a declaration. They would do whatever it took. Together, they would make their stand. The countdown clock ticked away in the background as everyone got into position. Daniels glanced at the screen one last time, watching as the alien fleet continued to grow closer. The ships were ready. The fighters were primed. The strike force was prepared. "Captain, the fleet's moving," Carter said from the cockpit of her fighter, her voice crackling through the communication system. "We're in position, ready to go." Daniels took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Do it. Everyone, engage on my mark." The tension in the room was palpable as Daniels raised his hand and paused for a moment, allowing the weight of the moment to sink in. The fate of humanity rested on their success. He had led countless missions before, but this one felt different. This wasn't just another battle. This was the final stand. "Now," Daniels said, his voice sharp and commanding. The moment he spoke, chaos erupted. The fighters launched, screaming into the sky at breakneck speeds. The alien fleet had already detected their presence and began to respond, firing volleys of energy blasts in retaliation. But the human fighters were faster, diving and weaving through the fire, expertly evading the alien weapons. They created a storm of confusion, forcing the alien ships to scramble, trying to catch them. In the midst of the chaos, Daniels and his team broke away, heading straight for the gap in the alien formation. The space was narrow, and the aliens' defensive weapons were closing in, but Daniels had no choice but to trust in their training. The strike force moved with precision, barely avoiding the deadly blasts that whizzed past them, each near miss a reminder of how high the stakes were. "We're in," one of the strike team members shouted over the comms. "We're heading straight for the flagship." The alien ships were now fully aware of the threat. They responded quickly, deploying their forces to intercept the human strike team. A massive alien warship veered toward them, its weapons charging up. Daniels could see it in his mind's eye. This would be their last chance. He knew they had to disable that ship, or they would never make it to the flagship. "Take that ship out," Daniels ordered, his voice rising above the noise. "We have to clear a path." The strike team immediately engaged, unleashing everything they had on the approaching warship. Their weapons lit up the dark void of space, and with a deafening roar, the alien ship began to crumble, its shields breaking under the onslaught. Explosions erupted in every direction as the human forces poured their firepower into it, creating an opening large enough to slip through. "We've got the opening," Daniels yelled, his voice tight with adrenaline. "Keep pushing forward." With the path clear, they surged forward, moving fast toward the heart of the alien fleet. The flagship loomed ahead, a massive, towering ship surrounded by an array of defensive turrets. It seemed impenetrable, but Daniels knew this was their moment. They had no choice but to strike now. The strike team approached the flagship, their ships darting through the sky like meteors. Energy blasts from the alien defenses rained down on them, but they were relentless, pressing forward with everything they had. They had one mission: destroy the flagship, and they would not stop until it was done. As they closed in on the massive ship, Daniels felt a rush of fear and excitement. This was the moment they had trained for. He could almost feel the weight of the universe on his shoulders, the countless lives depending on their success. But there was no room for doubt. He knew that if they didn't do this, humanity would fall. "Take out their shields," Daniels commanded. Major Carter led the charge, her fighter diving into the heart of the flagship's defensive perimeter. A barrage of fire erupted from the alien weapons, but Carter expertly dodged and weaved, using every maneuver in her arsenal. She was a master in the cockpit, and she knew exactly how to get close without getting hit. With a final deafening blast, the alien ship's shields flickered and failed, leaving it vulnerable. This was it. They had their chance. "Strike now," Daniels shouted. The strike team opened fire, unleashing everything they had in a concentrated assault. Energy blasts, missiles, and every weapon in their arsenal rained down on the flagship. The ship shook violently as the impact of the attack hit home. For a brief moment, it seemed like the ship might hold, but then the flagship's engines erupted in a massive explosion, sending shockwaves through the fleet. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then the alien fleet's response came, but it was too late. The flagship was destroyed, and with it, their command center. The entire alien force seemed to stagger, their once coordinated movements breaking down as they lost contact with their central command. Daniels and his team didn't stop. They continued to push forward, delivering blow after blow, ensuring the enemy could never recover. With their flagship destroyed, the alien forces were disoriented, and humanity's forces struck them from all sides. And then, amidst the destruction, came the words that Daniels had longed to hear. "We've done it. The fleet is falling apart." Daniels looked out at the wreckage, his heart pounding in his chest. They had done it. Against all odds, they had succeeded. But the battle was far from over. The aliens may have lost their command ship, but there were still more threats to face, more challenges to overcome. But for the first time in this war, Daniels allowed himself a moment of relief. Humanity had stood its ground, And the aliens had learned a harsh lesson. Never underestimate the power of the human spirit. The fight was far from over, but humanity's victory was now inevitable. The aftermath of the attack on the flagship was nothing short of chaos. The massive alien fleet, once a powerful unified force, had been thrown into disarray. Without their command center, the alien ships were scattered, their coordination completely shattered. But despite the destruction, the battle was far from over. The humans had delivered a devastating blow, but the aliens still had forces on the ground, and they weren't going to give up without a fight. Captain Daniels and his team knew they couldn't rest yet. This was the most critical point of the war. The alien invaders had already shown their cruelty and their overwhelming power, but now, with their command ship destroyed, the balance had shifted. It wasn't just about winning a battle anymore. It was about ensuring that humanity could take the upper hand once and for all. Daniels watched as the remnants of the alien fleet slowly began to regroup, trying desperately to salvage what remained of their operation. The destruction was massive, but the alien forces were resilient. They had resources, and they would use them to launch a counterattack. The war hero knew that humanity had to act fast before the aliens regained their strength. "We've hit them hard, but this isn't over," Daniel said, his voice filled with grim determination. "We need to strike again while they're vulnerable." Major Carter, who had been coordinating the ground forces, spoke up. "We're in position, Captain, but we'll need to move fast. The aliens are trying to reorganize, and if we don't act now, they'll have a chance to retaliate." Daniels nodded, his mind already working through the possibilities. "We've got one shot at this. We can't afford to waste it. We need to make sure they never get back on their feet." The remaining resistance forces, the soldiers who had survived the initial wave of destruction, were now ready to launch their final strike against the alien forces. Daniels had witnessed the incredible courage of these men and women. Many of them had lost loved ones, homes, and everything they knew in the invasion, but they were still fighting, and they were determined to win. It had been a long road to get to this point. The war had been brutal, with both sides suffering unimaginable losses. But Daniels and his team had come to understand something that the aliens could never fully grasp. Humanity's spirit, its resilience, was an unbreakable force. No matter how many times they were knocked down, they would get back up. No matter how dire the situation seemed, they would never surrender. As the final assault began, Daniels' team moved quickly and decisively. Their ships were now fully equipped with the latest weapons, and they were prepared for whatever the aliens could throw at them. The first wave of human fighters shot through the atmosphere, skimming the edge of the alien fleet as they descended on the surface of the planet. Their mission was clear: eliminate the remaining alien forces, take control of their bases, and ensure that no part of the alien invasion could survive. "We're moving in," Maya said, her voice tight with focus. "The first wave is engaging the ground forces. It's time to end this." Daniels felt a rush of adrenaline as he led the final charge. There was no turning back now. The war was about to end, one way or another. On the ground, the alien soldiers had fortified themselves, taking shelter in the deep bunkers and high-tech defensive structures they had set up during the invasion. But the humans were ready. The strike force had received new weapons, experimental technology that would give them the edge in this final battle. The aliens had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to learn from their previous encounters, and to innovate in the face of overwhelming odds. The alien forces, who had once looked down on humans as weak and primitive, were now about to learn just how dangerous their opponents could be. As Daniels and his team descended on the alien positions, they moved with precision. The battlefield was filled with explosions as both sides unleashed their firepower, but the humans' new weapons, designed specifically to counter the alien technology, began to turn the tide. The alien shields that had once seemed invincible were now no match for the humans' advanced weaponry. One by one, alien positions were overrun, and their soldiers began to retreat. But the aliens were not going to give up easily. They had one final trick up their sleeve, an emergency weapon that had been kept in reserve, hidden deep beneath the surface of the planet. Daniels knew they had to act fast before it was deployed. "We need to find their last weapon," Daniels ordered. "If they launch that thing, we're finished." Major Carter, leading a small unit to scout the area, contacted Daniels. "Captain, we found it. It's buried deep underground, in a heavily fortified bunker. If we don't stop it, the entire planet could be destroyed." Daniels gritted his teeth. "We don't have much time. Everyone, we need to get to that bunker. Now." With the alien forces retreating, the humans pushed forward, their eyes fixed on the prize. The alien superweapon. It was their last chance to ensure that the war was truly over. As they descended into the bunker's depths, they encountered fierce resistance from the remaining alien defenders. The aliens fought with desperation, knowing that if they didn't protect their weapon, humanity would be victorious. The final push was a brutal, close-quarters battle. Daniels fought alongside his team, his heart pounding in his chest as he saw the enemy forces closing in on their position. The walls of the bunker seemed to close in around them as the sounds of battle reverberated through the corridors. The team moved with a single goal in mind: destroy the weapon and secure victory. Finally, they reached the core of the bunker, where the alien weapon stood, massive, ominous, and brimming with destructive potential. It was a piece of technology unlike anything humanity had ever seen. But the humans were undeterred. Daniels gave the order to plant the explosives. With seconds to spare, the charges were set. "Everyone, get out," Daniels shouted as the countdown began. The team sprinted through the corridors, the sound of the explosion echoing in their ears as the ground shook beneath them. The weapon was destroyed, and with it, the last hope of the alien invaders. The battle was over. The aliens were defeated. Humanity had won. As Daniels and his team emerged from the bunker, they were greeted by the sight of the alien fleet scattering into the stars, their ships retreating in disarray. The war was finally over, and the price of victory had been steep. But humanity had proven its strength, its resolve, and its unwillingness to be conquered. Daniels looked around at the faces of his team. They were battered, bruised, and weary, but they were alive. And they had done it. They had saved Earth. The story of this victory would be told for generations to come, a testament to the power of the human spirit and the will to fight for survival. They had defied the odds, and in doing so, had shown the universe that no matter how great the challenge, humanity would always rise. "We did it," Daniels whispered to himself. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe it.